Hi folks, and welcome to the Short Vol Show Live. Today we are going to discuss some personal finance issues concerning your taxes, how to improve your credit. I know you might know something about this, but I may have some tips for you that you haven't heard yet and some advice. Also going to discuss a Deutsche Bank trade I did recently, and we'll look at the market in general. Non-farm payrolls came out better than expected at over 300,000. However, December's were readjusted down a bit, but still no signs of a recession in the economic data, at least currently for the United States. So that's good news for short vol. Article or comments came out from a Peter Thiel supporter saying that your short vol trade is going to go away as we are entering an environment of increasing volatility. We can talk about what we think that means and if that's true, and more coming up right now on the Short Vol Show Live. Stay with me. All right, so welcome back. Yeah, I went over and stayed at my folks' house last night because it was so cold out, and my apartment is kind of chilly sometimes. Anyway, let's take a look at, and it's strange why that's not coming up. Oh, I know. Let's take a look at the market. Currently, we are kind of pretty much unched right now. E-minis up 950. Actually, Dow up 173, so we're up a little bit, though NASDAQ only up 8. Let me turn this music down because it's bugging me. Do you like a little music in the background? Let me know. Okay, so I did enter into a Deutsche Bank trade, and I know a lot of people hate Deutsche Bank, and that's why it's down so much. But I did pre-earnings yesterday. I did buy some January calls, and let's just take a look at this for a second. I'm going to reduce the size of myself here. Actually, you know what I can do? I can put a filter on and make myself see-through, and that way I can't get in the way so easily like I seem to do all the time. So boom, boom, and now I am pretty much completely see-through. How about this? Opacity to 40%. All right, now I'm barely there. So, all right, so Deutsche Bank, okay, options, rumored in play as a takeover. This earnings was the first earnings they've made money since 2014. But what is the risk for me to buy some calls? Now, this is the calls I was looking at is January. Now, volatility, you've got an $8 stock. So the actual volatility numbers, which are, in the 50s basically for this issue, are not nearly as important because it's so dollar cheap as the actual premiums you're paying. So in this case, everything just seems cheap to me. And I said, well, maybe I'll buy some of the 10 calls. I was looking around to buy something that will help me participate in I'm kind of looking to, this is sort of like a reversion to the mean play here. So I'm kind of looking at, let's just take a look at the chart really quickly here. I'm kind of looking at this just kind of bouncing back to like, I don't know, 12 or something at some point. And so I'm looking at buying some sort of calls and as a cheap way to get long deltas. And so as I look at what's available here, if I go out, I don't know if this is going to happen by February, but if I go out to February, just as a basis here, the 8 calls are trading basically 10 cents above parity. Now we know, of course, just to refresh your options if you need a refreshment, that okay, stock is $8.79, so parity for the 8 call would be 79 cents, right? because the stock price is 79 cents above the strike price here. So parity would be 79 cents. These are trading a little over 79 cents. They're trading 87 cents. So 8 cents above parity is the bid. But you couldn't buy these on the bid probably. You'd have to pay closer to the offer. So essentially, buying the Feb 8 call is almost the same as buying stock. You're paying 10 cents extra to have that opportunity to pay 89 cents instead of $8.89 for this. But either way, buying the Feb 8s controls 100 shares of stock for each call you buy. But if you buy them in Feb, you're basically leasing the stock for 14 days to be able to buy the stock at $8. So I don't know what it's going to do in the next 14 days, and that seems like a not a very long period of time to give myself. So, but just out of interest, these calls 89 cents. The 9 calls 23 cents. Earnings, I believe, just came out. So let's move out a little bit further in time. Okay, so let's go to March. Now, all this stuff seems dollar cheap to me because, okay, so the March ones are like 10 cents higher, the 8 calls, but it gives you another month. Let's move out further. I actually moved out to Jan, 350 days, and was looking at the Jan 20 calls. Now, stock was higher when I looked at this, and it was pre-earnings, and I paid $2 for these Jan 20 calls. It's in my face by, 12, 13 cents at this point. With earnings having come out. However, basically what I like this trade because my downside is very controllable. If this stock were to go to, say, $7, these calls still would have some value 350 days out. So basically, I have 350 days for Deutsche Bank to trade above $10 to break even. And I like this trade because I can lay it off in several ways. So what ways could I lay it off? Well, I could sell something else in January against it. If I were to sell the 10 calls for $1, I could lay off half my risk by just selling the 10 calls against it for $1. So however many calls I bought, whatever that dollar amount is, let's say I bought 10 calls for $2 each call. So 10 times $2 is $20 or $2,000 in real dollars. So if you buy 10 calls for $2, you're spending $2,000. Well, if I sold the Jan 20s for $1 against, the Jan 10s for $1 against them, then I'm laying off half my risk because I'm collecting $1 for each one of these I sell. However, buying the 8-10 call spread for $1, that limits the most I can make on that is another $1. So to wait 350 days to make another $1 is capping my upside too much. So I wouldn't really want to sell those for $1. What I might want to do is sell something in a closer month, maybe a higher strike, like sell the 10 strike out in March. I could maybe sell the 10 strike for if we get a little pop for like 20 cents, and that would help finance my purchase. But basically, my goal with this is to just have this this cheap delta on and just hang out, see what happens. If we do get a pop, then I could sell something against it. But for now, just hang on to this delta for a very inexpensive shot. And if things do move higher, it will turn into a good trade. If things move lower, these calls should hold up pretty well because there's 350 days to go, and they're dollar cheap. If this was a very higher premium stock, like a higher price stock with big premiums, you wouldn't want to buy far out stuff with a takeover deal in the works, especially a cash one, because remember, when a cash deal, everything goes to parity. So if they announced a cash deal, any premium that was in these calls would disappear immediately. Right now, there is about $1 in premium in these Jan 20 calls. You can tell that by adding the premium to the strike price and subtracting the stock price. That's one way of doing it. Another way to just eyeball it would just be look over here at the put price, and that's going to tell you how much premium is in the money call. If you've got a call that's in the money, now the 8 call's in the money because 8 is lower than the stock price, which is 8.79 right now. If you've got a call that's in the money, to kind of just eyeball quickly how much premium is in that call, you could look over at the put. That will give you a rough idea of how much premium's in the call. All right, so I wanted to talk for a second about tax stuff. I know it's tax season. People are into their taxes. And I'm one of these people that likes to get my taxes back as quickly as possible. I had a little snafu several years ago with the tax man where I neglected to pay taxes for a year or two. I owed them some money. And they weren't coming after me, but as soon as I actually did file, then they came after me for the money. It wasn't a huge amount of money. I believe it was less than $10,000, but it was a hassle, and I ended up getting a lien against my credit, and it was a real nightmare. Fortunately, I went on a payment plan. I paid the government back, and I petitioned to get the lien against my taxes taken off, and it was eventually removed from my credit report, and so I was able to go on to doing better things. Let me just show you once again. I covered this in another video, but in case you missed that one, there is a website called IGotMyRefund.com. And this website, it's a lot of professionals. It's also like stay-at-home moms who are waiting for their refunds. It's a mixture of people, but it's just a forum, which is kind of a sort of an antiquated system these days of talking about stuff, but there are individual forums for each state, but there's a general forum here for refunds, and it's a great way just to check with people to see who's gotten their refund. You can find people that filed the exact same day as you did and see if they got their refund yet, to know if you're when you're due for your refund. Just some basics. Let's just talk some basics about tax refunds. Well, the first basic thing is that January 28th was the first official day the IRS is accepting refunds. However, they did start accepting refunds actually, I think, around the 14th of January. Every year they accept refunds early, and they have these things called test batches where people get processed early and they get their refunds early. And that, again, happened this year. And the early test batches this year, it appears, fell into 2 groups. The one group, which I believe ended somewhere around the 20th of January. Everybody who filed them was accepted before the 20th of January, was in the first test group, and some of them have already gotten their refunds. Then the second test group was like everybody between that 20th of January and the start of the official tax season, which was January 28th. And some of those people have, I believe some have gotten a direct deposit date, but no one's got their refunds yet. The other thing about taxes in the IRS is there's 2 groups. There's daily people and weekly people. Now, dailies is an accelerated group of people who've always had like no problems with their taxes, never have been in hot water with the IRS. They will get their refunds slightly quicker. They can update daily, whereas weeklies are people like me who've had some sort of issue in the past, whether it be major or minor, and theirs update weekly, and things go slightly slower for the weekly folks. Now, the other thing to know about your taxes and the IRS is transcripts. The way it works is that the first thing that once you've e-filed, you're going to get a your e-filing is first going to be either accepted or declined by the IRS, and that will generally happen within hours to within 48 hours of when you e-file your taxes. And the IRS has a website, where's my refund, and if they haven't accepted it yet, then your information will not appear on there at all. Once they've accepted your refund, or I'm sorry, your tax return, you will receive 1 bar on this website. So the next thing that happens, and basically they will accept most e-filings of income taxes unless there's blatant errors on it. They will accept them, and then they're just accepted. They go into a pile. Once the IRS starts processing your refund, the first thing that will happen when they've processed it, the first way to find out that you've had some activity or movement with your refund is through transcripts. Now, you can order IRS transcripts through the IRS website, and you can order them either mailed to you or online. And transcripts will update before the Where's My Refund site update. So people who are really obsessive about figuring out whether they got their, where the refund is, will check their transcripts often. And transcripts, like I said, you can find them online on the IRS website, and they update before everything else does. So once you, so if you check every day, you'll see all of a sudden it will show that you have a transcript. Now, there's different types of transcripts, and you want the refund transcript is the one that's going to pop up when you actually have a refund. But transcripts will pop up and will update before the bars on the I Got My Refund website update. So people who are really into it will check their transcripts every day, and when they see movement on their transcripts, there's codes on there that will tell you what your direct deposit date is for your refund, and that will be the first way that you can know that your refund is coming. And I became obsessed with this I Got My Refund site and followed it obsessively for years, because after I had problems with the taxman years ago, now I'm like obsessive about getting my taxes filed on time and getting my refund earlier. The reason I get a refund is because I have them withhold a little extra from each check. Why do I do that? Well, I was working with all these single moms who were getting these huge refunds every February, and I said, I want to get a refund too. And I know I'm just sort of tricking myself, but nevertheless, I have them withhold a little extra. Interest rates are relatively low, so it's not like I would be collecting a huge amount of interest on that money. And I work in a seasonal job as my side job, and we are basically not working from mid-December through mid-February, and thus it's nice to get a little extra bump in the pay in February. Comes out to work perfectly. So that's a little bit on refunds. The news that we have is some refunds have been issued. The government shutdown doesn't seem to have affected things at all, and so that's good news. I wanted to go on to FICO scores for a second and talk about credit. Now, credit is a big deal and a much misunderstood thing. A lot of people who are very responsible with money just don't have good credit because they haven't used credit cards. Credit score, which is basically issued, the formula for credit scores are issued by Fair Isaac Corporation, and the forum that I go to check this stuff out is called myfico.com. And I obsessively was on this forum for years about how to rebuild your credit, how to get how to start your credit. And it's a thing that a lot of people are interested in. There's a lot of scammers out there as far as credit scores go, because there's a bunch of companies that will take your money and say they're going to rebuild your credit, and they basically do stuff that you can do yourself very easily. There are three major credit agencies in the United States, and if this stuff is too basic for you, I apologize. I just want to get people to sort of a baseline here. There are three major credit industry agencies in the United States: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. They all have a slightly different way they calculate credit scores, and the way they actually calculate credit scores is proprietary. The actual formula is proprietary, but people have been able to kind of back out what it is that creates the score, and it's pretty well known what it is that creates your score, and it's basically a combination of you have to show that you've borrowed money and that you've paid it back in a timely fashion. And so the way to get a credit score is to get a credit card. And, you know, it's the old thing, well, if you don't have credit, how can you get a credit card? And the truth of that is that you start with a very small credit line, and you convince somebody to give you a very small credit line. And all the information on how to do this is in the MyFICO forums. And I had a credit journey where I had bad credit. You can see there's a theme here. The theme is that I had to start rebuilding my life at some point, and I had bad credit, I had debts and all this stuff, and was able to rebuild. And I had my own little credit journey, which I'm not going to bore you with right now, but safe to say, MyFICO forums is the best spot to learn about credit. And essentially, just really quickly, what I did was I started with a Capital One card that had like $300 credit. If you have such bad credit, like let's say your credit score is under 500, you have such bad credit that you can't be approved for even like a $200 credit card. You can get a credit card that is backed by your account. So basically, you have to put money in ahead of time, and then you use it like a credit card, and then it transfers after a while into actual credit account. There are that sort of thing offered. But generally, most people, even if they have terrible credit, can get, you know, a very small credit line on a card. I think mine was $300 Capital One card. And you get that card, you charge some stuff on it, you pay it off right away, and thus begins your credit journey. After a few months, they will raise your credit limit, and you can maybe apply for like a slightly higher tier of cards. For me, that was applying for the Chase Freedom card, and it was, I had to jump through some hoops. I learned on this forum to go, and I actually had to call in person and kind of talk somebody into giving me a credit card, a Freedom card. You know, I wasn't approved at first, and I said, well, what do I need to do to get approved? They said, well, you need to raise your score to this much. You need to show this. I told them that I explained my story, that I was rebuilding my credit, and, blah, blah, blah. And I eventually talked them into giving me another card. And then I actually got a third card, a Discover card. And I paid them on time, and I watched my scores slowly rise. The other important thing about credit cards and stuff like that is that you can get your credit scores for free. Most credit cards now and many banks will give you free credit scores. Things have changed a lot recently. Also, the credit agencies are required to give you your scores for free once a year. And so let me pull up the website for that right now, but you can get your credit scores for free once a year. So don't pay MyFICO. If you go to this MyFICO site, they're trying to sell you all kinds of credit products. Don't buy anything. Just sign up for the forum, and you can figure out how to do everything for free. No reason to start buying stuff. I don't want you to find stuff from me to help you financially and then buy something. That's not the point. The point is to not buy stuff and to save your money and build your wealth. So forum's free on MyFICO. I'm just going to pull up actually I'll put the link in the description to where you go to get your free credit score once a year. And basically, they're going to ask you things to establish your identity. Like it'll be like these multiple choice questions. You lived at which of these 3 addresses in the last year, et cetera, et cetera. And then they'll give you your score. How to improve your credit record. I'm not going to go into this super deep right here, but essentially, you can pull up your credit report. You can challenge things that aren't true on there. Now, you should try to challenge stuff. You can try to challenge stuff, and they have to go back and find the debt, depending on what sort of debt you have. And you might get some stuff taken off of your credit report. If there is fraudulent stuff on there, definitely get that taken off. But The most important thing is that you need to pay any stuff that's reported to the credit agencies. You need to pay that in a timely manner. Now, stuff that is like 30 days late is not a huge deal, but it is a big deal. And if you've got stuff that you haven't paid for years, you need to settle that somehow. Some people who have, I had big credit problems at one point because I tried to start a small business using credit cards and it didn't work out, and I owed all this debt and I couldn't pay it. And so I just kind of didn't deal with it. And so it just sat there and accumulated. And eventually I settled with these credit cards. Like I said to them, oh, I owe you $4,000. I'll give you $1,000 and settle the debt. And they agreed to the settlements, but that crushed my credit. And it takes 7 years for any single item to clear off your credit report. And so I had to wait 7 years for this stuff to fall off, where I had like 60, 90 days late things on my credit report. And that was devastating, and it hurt me for a long time. So if you can help it at all, you don't want to settle these things for less than what you owe, because that's going to crush you. And I mean, just think about it. A credit score is essentially telling people how likely is it that you are going to pay them if they loan you money. And if they see you being late on all this stuff and just blowing it off, obviously that's going to show them that it's less likely that they're going to pay you. Now, these companies have a certain amount of, they plan that certain percentage of people aren't going to pay. But it's very important to have a good credit score, and it can save you in the long run. And I know it seems counterintuitive that you have to actually have debt and pay it off to have a credit score, because you would think, well, the best would be to not have any debt at all. But you can play the game and just charge stuff on a credit card and pay it off, and for a few months, and keep a couple credit card accounts open and just use them every once in a while and build up your credit that way very easily. The hard thing is when you have all this credit to not use it and max out your cards. That's the hard thing, and it's very difficult for many people to not use their credit cards once they have them and incur all this debt. And that's kind of like what the credit cards are counting on. So it takes self-discipline to build your credit and to keep it, and it's very difficult for many people, but there is a way to do it, and there is a way to come back if you messed up. Anyway, so this is getting a little bit long, but that's some on that. There's a whole rabbit hole we could go down of which cards to start with, which cards are going to accept you at which levels, what the actual formulae for the different FICO scores are, which credit union uses which variation of which score and why, and you can go down these rabbit holes. But this My FICO forums is great for all kinds of stuff about credit scores, and I was obsessed with this website and this forum for a year or two. I mean, I would go on there every day, like crazily, like looking through everybody's story and talking about what was going on with credit for a really long time. I was really, really into it, but it is a good spot. Credit is very important, so check it out. All right, let's do a little market check here. And the NASDAQ now down. VIX basically unchanged. VIX 1656. It's getting pretty low. People seem pretty comfortable right now. I did, and you're going to be maybe surprised by this, but I did sell a little bit of downside. So I am actually long, in a way, UVXY now slightly. I did sell the expiring in 14 days. I did sell the 48-46 put spread small in UVXY. Just thinking that after this down move we've recently had, that we'll get some sort of little pop here at some point. The spread right now is $4 away from starting to hurt me, but so I am slightly long here. I'm just looking for a little pop in volatility at some point in the next 14 days, at which point I can either close my position or I can sell some upside against it. So not much going on for me as far as short volatility right now. Other than that, I am short the VIX via VXXB a little bit, but beyond that, small positions. I am following Facebook very closely. Amazing rally in Facebook yesterday, currently unchanged. Rally in Apple yesterday, and we're gonna have to see what happens here. But it's like all of a sudden the worries about the market have dissipated and everybody's bullish again. So it was a great scoop for some stuff down when we were really getting pounded down here about a month ago. I was telling people to try to buy a little bit there, and I fortunately did buy. I got back in my 401k in the SPY and ConocoPhillips and some other issues. And it looks like people are not so worried right now about things. The government went back to work. It seems like some of the crisis in Washington is like dissipated for the moment. Now, they still don't have a plan on funding the government after 21 days, but it appears that there won't be another shutdown, that they're going to figure something out here. So that's good news. It's all good news. Tesla. Once again, Tesla has managed to stay in its band. People were calling that, oh, well, this time it really is going to go lower. And guess what? It didn't go lower. It just stays in its band. The band being from between like 250 and 380. And it's just stayed in that range for a long time now. And it's been a great trading range to be short premium if you can have the cojones to actually do that, because it's scary. So I'm still long ACB, Aurora Cannabis. I figured like that is one of the ones that hasn't been touched by scandal. I'm a little bit afraid of Afria right now still because of all that bearish news about that. Tilray, same. Although Tilray may have found a bottom. But yeah, ACB long here. COP long here. And Tilray is still looking at. I think Tilray is another good spot to sell premium in here. And I'm looking at maybe buying a calendar spread or selling some strangles at some point here. Okay, well, that has been quite a bit of my blabbing about finance and things that I know a lot of people like to avoid. So I will let you back to your regular day. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next Short Vol Show live.